think that's exactly right.
Mr. Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's be honest. This is one of the most important and most boring hearings in congressional history. We are lucky if this is even on C-SPAN 3. There are about maybe 20 live people in this room, and half of them are asleep, because we are not speaking a language the average American voter understands. So let me put the cookies on a low shelf. And especially I'd like to get Dr. Gosar's attention on this, because as a new member, perhaps he can rescue us. We are now sitting in a room of the only large enterprise left in America that is exempt from using real accrual accounting. This violates the first plank of the contract with America back in 1994-95, in which Congress was supposed to live by the laws it passes for the rest of the people. It's my understanding that every enterprise in this country with revenues of about $5 million has to use, in addition to cash accounting, also real accrual accounting. But somehow the federal government is exempt. We're hypocritical. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, I still can't find one lobbying enterprise in this town, and Lord knows there are thousands of them. There are between 30 and 60 lobbyists for every one of us. Not one of those folks, to my knowledge, is for real accrual accounting for the federal government. Isn't that interesting? When the average Civic Club member back home has to use real accrual accounting for their business, whether for-profit or non-profit. State and local governments have to use real accrual accounting. It prevents them from hiding their unfunded pension liabilities and things like that. So why isn't the federal government using it? This is a mystery that you gentlemen can help us solve, because while we're talking here about electronic display of information or fine-tuning these facts, there's not a lack of information. There's a willful blindness to that information. The rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, have already said maybe we have 1 or 2 years left before we face a possible downgrade of the Treasury bond, because we're so mismanaging our nation's finances. Now, how are we mismanaging it? According to cash accounting, our debt is on the order of $14 trillion. But if you look at our unfunded obligations, programs like Medicare, Social Security, things like that, it's more like unfunded obligations of 50, 60, who knows how many trillion dollars, many times larger. Our debt this year isn't $1.5 trillion or so, it's more like $2 trillion. So when are we going to get real on these numbers? And that's why I think it's important to be somewhat blunt, be simple without being simplistic, to help the average American understand the situation we're in. Because it's very convenient here today for federal officials to hide the real numbers. You're talking about electronic displays so that the average citizen, the Treasury Department has never held a press conference about the release of the financial report of the United States government. Our own Treasury officials in both parties, whether it was the Bush administration or the Obama administration, they deliberately hide the release of this document, the only one compiled, according to law passed by Senator John Glenn, that uses the real numbers. So forgive me for being frustrated, but the business mantra is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We are refusing to measure the dimensions of our problem. A historian will look back at years hence and say they had the tools to do a good job, but they refused to use the tools. The tool is real accrual accounting, because that enables us to see what's not only in the national checkbook, but what's on the national credit card. So I know Mr. Allen knows these issues cold. I appreciate his great service on FASAB. I appreciate the other pioneers who've worked on this. But somehow we have to break the gridlock on this issue. Let's find one business lobby in America that's willing to support real accounting for the federal government. Where is the Chamber of Commerce? Where is the Business Roundtable? Where is the NFIB? For that matter, where is the Wall Street Journal? I have a chart in my office. I've had it for years. What's the debt? What's your share of the debt? We're using cash numbers. We need the real numbers. And you gentlemen can, while you're doing all the fancy fine-tuning stuff, you can help us understand the plain, blunt truth. We're not using honest accounting standards, not using real accounting standards, not using accrual accounting standards for the federal government. So this is more of a statement than a question. I appreciate your efforts, Mr. Chairman, to highlight these issues, but I think it's important to make this a less boring hearing and to put the cookies on a low shelf so that perhaps there's somebody out there in C-SPAN 3 land who will make this a cause and bring this to light. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper, and your statement is one of the reasons I'm delighted to be back on the committee with you, and as I said, your efforts over many years to raise these very, very important issues, and you say maybe boring, but ever, ever important, and look forward to working with you as we go forward in these 2 years to do a better job in having the American people truly understand the financial crisis facing us, because as you said, the real numbers are tens of trillions of dollars of unfunded liabilities out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Connolly.